Good morning, PSW staff, clients, friends joining us for Wednesday class. Thanks for tuning in. Yesterday, I'm still having so much fun from Aaron Copland, and the father of the American soundtrack. At least my thesis is that, and yours is too. All that open space creates a lot of stuff, and the open prairie, it was amazing he was able to evoke that. And then your film scoring results are in for Miller's Crossing, so that's a done deal. So proud of you. We'll see that on Friday. We're going to be staying in America all week, actually, now that I've been thinking about it. We're going to be going to a state and a city, but we're not going to be doing any history of that. We're just going to be talking about a very famous band, and also we're going to get into a little bit of music theory and classical music. So, just hold your horses. It's going to be a really fun one. Today we're going to be talking about the great American rock band, Chicago. Chicago sold over 100 million records, and one of the longest running and best-selling groups of all time. Started in 1967. You guessed it, they started in Chicago. According to Billboard, they're second only to the Beach Boys with the most successful American rock band of all time in terms of albums and singles. So that's pretty crazy. Now, they weren't called Chicago. They were first. They were, before that, they were called Chicago Transit Authority. And in 1967, which is when they became a band. 1967 is probably, they're not the only ones that got a band in that year. That year was the Summer of Love, Summer of the Monterey Pop Festival. 1967 was, in San Francisco in 1967, everybody had a band. Everybody was into this new, rock and roll psychedelic music. So they're described as a rock and roll band with horns. Are they the first? No, but they're one of the first rock and roll bands to actually have horns. Blood, Sweat, and Tears starts the same year, 1967, and they, of course, have horns with their rock and roll music. But Chicago was different. They blended classical, jazz, R&B, and pop music, but most importantly, they had really great songs. You need great songs. Of course, this is subjective. I think they're great songs. But, I can't be alone. I'm sure other people do too. But they had a whole stream of hits in the late 60s and 70s. So we're going to be talking about that. First, where is Chicago? Well, let's leave Brooklyn, where Aaron Copland was born, and let's go over to Illinois. And let's talk about Chicago. They started in 1967, and at a little meeting with the saxophonist, Walter Perezader. He was one of the founding members, along with Terry Kath, the guitarist, and Robert Lamb, the keyboard player, and they all sang, actually. They all were really good singers. Robert Lamb wrote most of the hits, but also Pete Cetera. Pete Cetera was another lead vocal and wrote maybe one of their most famous songs, If You Leave Me Now.
You leave me now, you'll take away the biggest part of me. Ooh, no, baby, please don't go.
But Perezader was very influenced by something the Beatles did. Of course, the Beatles were always ahead of their time. Paul McCartney wrote a song called Got to Get You Into My Life, which is from Revolver. Great song.
Ooh, then I suddenly see you. Ooh, did I tell you I need?
They had 2 trumpets and 2 tenor saxophones on that track. It was an homage to Motown music because, of course, as we know, rock and roll, Motown music had horns in it. The Beatles weren't the first to do that. They were one of the first to do it with rock and roll music, though, using horn sections. And Perezader was like, whoa, maybe we can use more horns, because he was a horn player, in in this new thing going on, this new rock and roll sound going on, and you know, 'cause in the late '60s, you're also experiencing some hard rock music. We still call it rock and roll, but mostly we're getting into more. This is before Led Zeppelin, but getting into Led Zeppelin almost with hard rock music. But he said, what if we add brass instrumentation to these rock songs? What would happen there? So they gained a lot of success as a cover band, then covering other people's music, which is how a lot of bands start off, because it's easier learning other people's music than writing your own songs. So they were called The Big Thing, which is what I used to be called a long time ago in high school, and they moved to Los Angeles. LA, that's the place to be, baby, right? I mean, you gotta be in LA. They signed with Columbia and they changed their name from Big Head to Chicago Transit Authority, which they had to change a year later because they were gonna get sued by the Transit Authority, so they just became Chicago. But where do they go? They go to the Whiskey. We did a whole class on the Whiskey last summer, can you believe that? The Whiskey A Go-Go, which is where the Doors were the house band, and in 1968 they started playing Sunday and Monday nights there, and this is where Jimi Hendrix found them. In fact, he brought them on tour as his opening act for a few shows that he did. And he also said about Terry Kath, the guitar player in Chicago, he said he was his favorite guitar player. So for Jimi Hendrix to say that about somebody, and we'll talk about Terry Kath's guitar playing in a little later. So they get a lot of exposure in West Hollywood. I mean, this is where Janis Joplin, Jimi Hendrix, the Doors, they're all hanging out in West Hollywood. And in 1969, they released a double album, which was their band's first release, and it made it to number 17 and sold over 1 million copies by 1970. And it includes some of their best songs. Does anybody really know what time it is? No, that's not a question. That's one of their most famous songs.
As I was walking down the street one day, a man came up to me and asked me what the time was that was on my watch. And I said, does anybody really know what time it is? Does anybody really care?
So as we're hearing their music, we're hearing a rock and roll band with horns, and it's an intricate horn section. They were all classically trained musicians, horn players, so they were really top notch. They weren't just rock guys picking up a trumpet. They were all well educated and well trained. So after their first release, the band shortened the name to Chicago. In 1970, they come out. Robert Lamb writes the very famous song 25 or 6 to 4.
Sitting cross-legged on the floor, touching 5 or 6 to 4.
1972, Robert Lamb also writes Saturday in the Park, which is one of my favorites.
Saturday in the park, I think it was the 4th of July. Saturday in the park, I think it was the 4th of July. People talking, people laughing, a man selling ice cream, singing Italian songs.
So one thing I want to talk about a little bit here is voice leading. I told you there'd be a little bit of music theory in here, but we're going to make it so simple and so fun, so much fun for the kids. If the kids are there, get them here, because they're going to be loving this. Voice leading is a linear progression, okay, of just one line. It's not counterpoint where there's more than one line. It's one line going through a different progression and interacting with chords to create harmonies throughout a chord. So we're going to take a look at that. Probably the king of this is Bach. Voice leading is so you're going through a pattern of notes to get to the next chord. Now there's proper voice leading, there's I don't think rock bands were really looking at music theory books to. Usually, the best way to do it is just to use your ear. Let's take a look at Bach's prelude. His fugue in C minor from the Well-Tempered Clavier. Just take a look at those three notes. So this is in C minor. C is the root, right? B natural is the leading tone. This is going to be voice leading, and the leading tones has to resolve to C. If you just heard this, you'd say, well, it's got to go to C, right? It's got to go back. So the leading tone this is part of voice leading. So just those three notes of Bach, that's all we're talking about. So the leading tone. B is the leading tone. B is going to lead you to C. It's going to lead you back home. Somehow our brain tells us, now we're home. So what does this have to do with Chicago? I'm not sure. I thought you'd have the answer. Now, let's look at one of their most famous songs, 25 or 6 to 4, recorded in 1969 with Pete Cetera on vocals. And lest anyone think it was about drugs, and people did. I mean, the song was banned in some places because they thought it was about drug use. It wasn't. It was just about him trying to write a song in the middle of the night. It's a very simple song when you think about it. It's 4 bars, 4 measures, that's it. 5 chords, right? So A minor, G, D, F, E. Green Day uses this in Brain Stew. A lot of bands have used this same chord progression. Just listen to the opening chords and you've heard this before. One thing I really want to feature and look at is Terry Kath's brilliant solo. Now, Terry Kath died in 1978, and a lot of people said that's when Chicago kind of died. He was young, trouble with alcohol and drugs, and also was playing around with some guns. So I think it was an accidental self-inflicted gunshot wound that killed him, unfortunately. So, but we want to focus on his solo. Let's listen to his solo and the beauty of it. I first loved this solo because of the wah-wah pedal, because I thought that was the craziest sound I'd ever heard. If you hear when he steps on that pedal to get the wah-wah sound. I like when things are that easy. It's a wah-wah pedal because it sounds like wah-wah. Okay, so I thought that was great. Now as I listen to it, I realize he's doing some amazing voice leading with 7 notes. And let's go to this measure and let's hear Terry Kath. You see that G sharp? Well, if the song's in A minor, the leading tone is G sharp, because we have to get to home. We have to get to our, even though it's a minor home, not a major home, A is our home, and G sharp is the leading tone and is going to get us home. And I feel like these 7 notes are so perfect are a perfect example of voice leading from Terry Kath. I feel like it's such a melodic solo throughout the whole thing, but I just thought we'd talk about these few bars. That it's such a beautiful line, a line that goes back to Mozart and Bach and voice leading. That the line is so musical and beautiful, and again, he's just holding those notes, and it shows you that, you know, he was using his ears. He's not looking at music theory books before he decides to solo. I don't know Terry Kath, but I'm almost certain he never did that. Doesn't matter. He was using his ears, and his ears tell you that this is the voice leading he's choosing. So I thought, why not just look at this solo just as an example of great voice leading in popular music? So that's just a little taste of classical music and a little taste of Terry Kath's great solo. Chicago sold over 40 million units in the US, and 23 gold, 18 platinum albums. Very successful band. Wrote some really great songs. I think a lot of people in the 70s, 80s, and 90s thought of them as contemporary, adult contemporary music, and maybe some of it was, but I like their early stuff, their rock and roll stuff, the stuff that really swings and really cooks. And I hope you do too. So tomorrow we're going to be looking at a little bit of LA, a little bit of, you know, it's time to be over there, I think. Okay, love you, miss you, hope you enjoyed this, and see you tomorrow.